And I now give the floor to the ambassador of the Russian Federation, Vassily.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo for the briefing on the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories, and we also thank today's other briefers from the Palestinian Israeli NGO Echo Peace Middle East. We note with regret that the Middle East continues to suffer a turbulent period. The region is rocked by numerous crises, both old and new. The terrorist threat remains one of the most serious challenges. Its scale points to the need to join the efforts of the international communities in order to set up a counterterrorism front that is as broad as possible, something for which the Russian Federation has repeatedly called for. At the heart of the instability in the Middle East is the Palestinian-Israeli settlement process. Recently, we have been observing dangerous trends on this track. The practice of unilateral steps is expanding, as well as that of aggressively revising previously agreed-at arrangements. For us, the internationally recognized basis for the Middle East settlement, including Security Council resolutions, the Arab Peace Initiative, and the Madrid Principles, remains ironclad. However, the point of no return has not yet been passed. The report of the Quartet of Middle East Mediators of 2016 lists the actions that must be taken in order to restore trust among the parties and resume a sustainable political process. The first thing that needs to be done is a cessation of Israeli settlement activity in the West Bank, as well as the policy of demolishing Palestinian property. Violence must be renounced. An end to terrorist raids must be put. Palestinians and Israelis must refrain from aggressive and provocative rhetoric. And that is exactly how we see announcements to annex the settlements in the West Bank as examples of such rhetoric. We are deeply convinced that no party can achieve any breakthroughs alone. This has been repeatedly confirmed by the history of the Middle East. We see the Quartet, whose functioning has been approved by numerous Security Council resolutions, as a relevant mechanism that is more necessary now than ever, and we are prepared to activate the political segment of its work. Russia will continue forming a positive agenda on the Middle East settlement, including building up coordination with regional actors. The latest session of the Russian Arab Forum for Cooperation, which took place in Moscow on April 16 and 17, confirmed that we share approaches to finding lasting solutions in the Middle East. Our proposal to hold a summit in Russia between the leaders of Palestine and Israel remains on the table. We recall that the leader of Palestine has repeatedly reaffirmed his consent to participate. It is important to continue resolute work to restore unity in Palestinian ranks. The most recent intra-Palestinian meeting in Moscow in February was useful, particularly in the context of the efforts of regional players, in particular Egypt and Jordan. Active international efforts to correct the dire humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strips are also necessary. Any assistance to Gaza must be carried out in coordination with the legitimate authorities headed by President Abbas, and be part of the task of restoring Palestinian union. That is precisely the logic we followed when we recently transferred 2 tons of flour to assist Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. We will continue providing assistance to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees in the Near East. The activity of UNRWA has not only a humanitarian but also a political dimension. It has an important stabilization effect on Palestinian territories and in the Middle East in general. Mr. President, there is a need to urgently activate collective diplomacy in order to prevent the collapse of efforts that the international community has already undertaken to create the conditions to implement the only viable 2-state solution as a result of direct talks between Palestinians and Israelis. We believe that sending a Security Council mission to the Middle East would allow to strengthen our unity and step up cooperation with the parties. We call on our colleagues in the Security Council to think about creative approaches to relaunching our work on the Middle East settlement. At the same time, any ideas should take into account agreed settlement parameters, which include the Arab Peace Initiative adopted by the Arab leaders, which enshrines an important principle of land for peace. In that context, we would like to once again reaffirm that the Golan Heights are undoubtedly Syrian territory that Israel occupied as a result of the War of 1967 and illegally annexed 14 years later. Mr. President, instability in the Middle East requires steps towards unity on the part of responsible members of the international community. However, their actions must not follow the logic of imposing outdated bloc thinking as many saw the event in Warsaw. Rather, it should aim to create a platform of dialogue that would allow to seek solutions to the security situation in the Middle East in a non-confrontational manner. The Secretary General has been mandated to work in this area in accordance with Security Council Resolution 597. There is also interest in this on the part of regional players. This was once again reaffirmed during the conference recently held in Baghdad with the participation of parliament members of countries neighbors of Iraq. We believe that the Russian concept for security measures in the Persian Gulf could serve as a good basis for any future regional architecture. Improving relationships between countries in the Middle East would further move forward process towards putting an end of the most acute conflicts in the region. The efforts being made in this area include the concept of political and diplomatic settlements should be the central line to be followed. Attempts at a solution by force, as well as encouraging various illegal armed groups in order to implement geopolitical goals, must be abandoned and left to the past. We are prepared to work constructively with our partners on all the items on the Middle East agenda. We are convinced of the need to increase our coordination and developing consolidated approaches, as well as continuing steps towards unification. And an analysis confirms the work that is necessary in this area. Thank you.
I thank the Ambassador of the Russian Federation for his statement, and